So, a lot of people, when they look at me and the charities that I do, this is from the heart.
The glass doors of First Capital Bank shuddered as they flew open. Walter Thompson tightened his grip on his wooden cane as two security guards led him firmly toward the exit, his scuffed leather shoes scraping against the polished floor. "I've told you 3 times already, sir, no exceptions," the bank teller's voice rang out, slicing through the quiet murmur of the lobby. "Without updated digital ID, we can't give you access, no matter how long you've been a customer." Walter's voice shook, each word revealing the weight of frustration and helplessness. "Please, I've been coming here every month for 30 years. Miss Sarah used to help me. She knew who I was." His hands, stiff from arthritis, struggled to hold a handful of old documents, utility bills, his veteran's card, a faded letter from Social Security. The papers slipped through his fingers, fluttering to the floor like dry leaves. A few customers stepped forward to help him, but the guards quickly motioned them to stay back. "Sir, you're disturbing the peace," the taller guard said loudly, his voice echoing off the high ceiling. "My wife's medicine," Walter said hoarsely, his voice nearly breaking. His eyes were glassy, but he blinked back the tears. "The pharmacy closes at 5. I just need to get to my pension. It's already in the account." Outside the wide glass windows, people walking by began to slow down, some lifting their phones as they caught sight of what was happening. Inside, customers shifted awkwardly. Some looked away, others watched with growing discomfort. A young mother gently covered her child's eyes. An older woman clutched her necklace and muttered, "This isn't right. This just isn't right." "That's enough," said the second guard firmly, taking Walter by the elbow. "If you won't leave on your own, we'll help you out." The harsh lights above reflected off the tears now slipping down Walter's cheeks as he was led away. His cane tapped unevenly against the cold marble floor with each shaky step. Standing outside the bank, Walter looked down at the scattered papers at his feet. They couldn't begin to explain what had just happened. His veteran's ID, Social Security letter, and 30 years of banking history told the story of a man who had done his part. But today, none of that mattered. All he had wanted was simple. His wife, Margaret, had just been given a new prescription earlier that morning. It cost $486. Their pharmacy, Anderson's drugstore, would close exactly at 5 p.m., and now with only 2 hours left, he had no way to pay for it. "Mr. Thompson?" A firm but polite voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. Rebecca Stevens, the bank's new manager, stepped out of her office. At 34, she was already a fast climber in National Financial Group, having been promoted just 3 months earlier after the merger. Her specialty, rolling out strict security policies, had quickly built her a reputation as one of the company's rising stars. "Miss Stevens," Walter said, pulling himself a little taller, the old habit of carrying himself with dignity still in him from his years coaching basketball. "I've been trying to tell your staff. I've banked here since 1989. Every teller used to know me by name." Rebecca motioned him toward her glass-walled office, sleek and modern. Walter followed slowly, leaning hard on his cane, while the security guards hovered a few steps behind. "Mr. Thompson," she began once seated at her desk, "I understand you're here to withdraw money from your pension, but you haven't completed the mandatory digital verification upgrade." Her fingers tapped quickly across her keyboard. "According to our system, we sent you 4 notices about this change." Walter nodded faintly. "Yes, those blue letters. Margaret tried to help me with the computer part, but—" His voice dropped. "She's been too sick. The chemotherapy takes all her strength." Rebecca's eyes flicked to her screen where red alerts glowed across the banking system. The new platform set up during the merger demanded every account go through multiple layers, 2-factor codes, biometric scans, smartphone app enrollment. The rules were strict, no exceptions. "The merger brought new security requirements," she explained, keeping her tone carefully professional. "Without digital verification, we can't confirm your identity. These federal standards are meant to prevent fraud, especially cases targeting seniors. Walter's knuckles whitened around his cane. I have my driver's license, my veteran's ID, even the original documents from when I opened the account in '89. Isn't that enough proof? Rebecca shook her head. I'm sorry, but physical ID doesn't meet the standard anymore. Corporate policy requires the secure app, along with the full digital process. She turned her monitor so he could see. Smartphone with app installed, third-party ID scan, biometric registration, two-factor setup, digital signature. But I don't have a smartphone, Walter whispered, his voice breaking. Margaret and I, we share a flip phone. It's always been enough, until today. Rebecca's hands stiffened on the keyboard. She could still hear the morning's corporate email in her mind. 0 exceptions to security protocols. Any violation triggers management review. Her own position, her mortgage, her career, all depended on following the rulebook exactly. Maybe a family member could help you set up the digital access, she offered, though she knew it would take days. Walter met her eyes, his gaze tired but steady. My son's stationed in Germany. Margaret's sister will arrive next week to help with her care. But this prescription, he laid the slip gently on her desk. This can't wait. On her screen, she saw the full picture of Walter's account. Steady savings, years of deposits, never a single overdraft. Yet the glaring red warning at the top left no room for mercy. Unverified account. Access restricted. Outside the glass office, the lobby had fallen quiet. Customers were watching closely now. Many knew Walter. He was the coach who spent nights in the old gym, who bought uniforms when kids' families couldn't, who wrote college recommendations and showed up at graduations long after his players had moved on. The wall clock ticked steadily toward 5 p.m., each second tightening the deadline for Margaret's prescription. The system meant to protect people like Walter had turned into the very thing standing in his way. Rebecca rose from her chair, her choice already made. To her and her staff, Walter's persistence had shifted from concern to disruption. They wanted him gone. At that same moment, Shaquille O'Neal and his teenage daughter Mahira pulled into the bank's lot. As they headed toward the entrance, they spotted him. An elderly man sitting on a side bench, shoulders shaking as he held tightly to a wooden cane. "Dad, look," Mahira whispered, tugging her father's sleeve. The sight was jarring, an old man crying quietly outside a bank in broad daylight. Papers lay scattered at his feet, medical slips, bank forms, even old photos spilling from a worn wallet. Shaq paused, his 7 feet 1 inch frame towering over the scene. His voice was low and kind. "Sir, are you all right?" Walter looked up quickly, brushing tears away with the back of his hand. The old coach's instinct for dignity was still there, even now. "I'm sorry, he murmured, bending to gather his papers. "It's just my wife Margaret. She needs her new cancer treatment, and they won't—" His words broke as he motioned toward the bank doors. Mahira had already dropped down to help, picking up the scattered documents. She held up a photo, a team picture from Millbrook High's championship run. "Dad, look, he's Coach Thompson. They were talking about him at camp today." Recognition flashed across Shaq's face. He remembered the stories about the coach who never turned a kid away, who worked extra jobs to keep programs alive, who poured his life into the community. This was that man. Through shaky breaths, Walter laid out what had happened. The new digital requirements, the deadline for the medication, his wife waiting at home. Every detail landed heavy. 4 decades I've banked here, Walter whispered, and now I'm treated like a stranger. Like all those years don't matter, because I don't have their app. Mahira, phone already in hand, scrolled through the bank's policies at lightning speed. "Dad, this isn't right," she said firmly, her teenage certainty cutting through the air. "They can't just—" But Shaq didn't wait for her to finish. He had made up his mind. Having lost his sister to cancer, the mention of medication hit a place too close to home. He reached down, offering his hand. "Coach Thompson, let's walk back in there together," he said, lifting him gently. "Sometimes people forget a policy isn't the whole story. A person is." As the three of them moved toward the entrance, heads turned. Customers began whispering, phones came out, and soon the moment was being streamed online. When the glass doors slid open, silence swept the lobby. Every eye was on them, the towering NBA legend, his daughter recording, and the coach whose dignity seemed to return with each careful step. Rebecca Stevens, just stepping back into her office, froze when she saw who was walking in. The energy in the lobby shifted instantly. This wasn't just about an older man struggling with new rules anymore. It had become a test of the bank itself, a moment that asked what it really stood for. "Miss Stevens," Shaq's deep voice rolled across the room with the same force he once brought to the court. "I think we need to talk about what banking really means to a community." The tension was sharp enough to feel. Rebecca's tablet shook slightly in her grip as she glanced from Shaq to Walter. She tugged at her blazer, trying to gather herself, though the effort barely covered her unease. "Mr. O'Neill," she began carefully, her corporate training showing in every word, "while I respect your concern, there are federal regulations we simply cannot." "Let me stop you right there," Shaq cut in, leaning forward just enough to make his presence impossible to ignore. At 7 feet 1 inch, he filled the space with ease. "I sit on the boards of banks. I've been through mergers, so when you bring up federal regulations, don't assume I don't know exactly what's required and what isn't." Around them, staff members had drifted closer, wide-eyed. What had started as an ordinary Monday was quickly turning into something closer to a courtroom standoff, with Shaq towering as both judge and jury. "Answer me this," Shaq said, pulling out his phone. "Coach Thompson's record here. 43 years, steady deposits, never once an overdraft. Does all that history mean nothing? Isn't that proof enough of who he is?" Mahira kept her camera steady, capturing the scene. The contrast in her frame said everything. Shaq's sleek smartphone in one hand, Walter's battered passbook in the other, a picture of progress clashing with humanity. "You're wasting this man's time because a computer system says so." Shaq's voice dropped lower, heavy with experience. "I know what it's like to watch the clock when it comes to medical care. Every minute this bank argues about apps and codes. Coach Thompson's wife is at home waiting for medicine she needs to survive." Rebecca's grip on her tablet faltered. "Sir, I do understand the emotional side, but do you?" Shaq rose to his full height, and several employees instinctively backed up a step. "Because what I see is a bank that's forgotten why it exists. Banking isn't only about locking down money, it's about building trust." He motioned toward the lobby, where customers pressed against the glass, their phones up and recording. "Look around. Everyone out there knows Coach Thompson. They trust him with their kids, their futures. Yet this bank, where he's trusted his savings for 4 decades, can't trust him enough to give him his own money." The only sound was the steady hum of the air conditioning. Rebecca's face went pale as the truth settled in. This wasn't just one unhappy customer anymore. This was the kind of moment that could define the bank's reputation in the world outside, where one viral video could erase years of polished branding. "Here's what's going to happen," Shaq said, his tone steady now, more determined than confrontational. "We're going to help Coach Thompson get his money today, right now. And starting tomorrow, you're going to take a hard look at every policy that puts convenience over basic human dignity. Because if you don't," he let the pause linger, the weight of it filling the room, "I'll personally help Coach Thompson move every dollar to a bank that still remembers what community means." The power of his words wasn't just in his voice. It was in the dozens of cameras recording through the glass, the news vans already pulling up outside, the viral story of a beloved coach denied his wife's life-saving medicine over a smartphone app. Rebecca glanced down at her tablet, then at Walter's worn passbook, then at the towering figure of Shaquille O'Neal standing firm in front of her. She knew this was more than policy. It was a choice between rules and compassion. The clock read 4:47 p.m. Margaret's prescription deadline crept closer, and in that small office, the decision felt bigger than banking. At 4:49 p.m., Rebecca chose. Her hand shook slightly as she picked up the passbook. "Let's process your withdrawal right now, Coach Thompson," she said, her voice carrying something softer than before. "We'll use the emergency override protocol. I'll take responsibility." As the transaction went through, Shaq's eyes caught a familiar picture tucked inside Walter's old phone. It was a faded photo from 1985, a young Walter Thompson coaching a tall teenager who would later make it to the NBA. "You coached Marcus Wilson?" Shaq asked, eyebrows lifting in surprise. Walter nodded, a small smile breaking through. "I taught him that skyhook you could never block," he said, the memory briefly pushing aside his worry. Shaq laughed, the sound filling the office and easing the last of the tension. "Man gave me headaches in '96. That was your move, huh?" By 4:53 p.m., Walter held the envelope with his funds. He turned to Shaq, his eyes glistening. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice heavy with gratitude. "Margaret, she's all I've got. This medicine means everything." Shaq extended his hand to Rebecca, shaking it firmly. "Thank you for making the right call," he said warmly. "The biggest assists in life don't happen on the court." Rebecca nodded, a genuine smile replacing her stiff corporate mask. As they headed out, Shaq stopped briefly at the ATM. Without making a show of it, he withdrew some cash and pressed it into Walter's hand. When the old man started to object, Shaq held up a hand and grinned. "Think of it as an investment in the Skyhook legacy." Mahira watched as the two men, one towering, one bent with age, yet both giants in their own way, shared a final handshake under the fading afternoon light. She realized then that some victories aren't about points or trophies, but about small, simple acts of dignity. What an assist! How would you feel if an elderly person was turned away just because they didn't know how to use new technology? Should the bank have helped Walter instead of shutting him out? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow for more stories like this one.